Why is the Bible so special?
Did Jesus claim to be God? And even if he did, why do I have to believe? Where did God come from?
How can miracles be possible?
Why is Jesus the only way to get to God?
Isn't the Bible full of contradictions?
Is Christianity a crutch?
Why does a good God allow evil to exist?
Why do Christians say Jesus is God's son?
Can Christianity be proven?
Why should I believe your interpretation of the Bible?
Don't all religions basically teach the same thing?
What about those who've never heard about Jesus?
Are there answers?
Are there answers to these questions?
Welcome to the session this morning. My name is Rich Knopp. I'm a teacher here at the college and the seminary, graduate school for that matter. And my areas of specialty, you might say, are philosophy and Christian apologetics, neither of which you probably know much of anything about. Like, what is philosophy and apologetics? That's one of those long, weird words that a lot of people don't know much about. But basically, apologetics is the attempt to try to offer a defense of our Christian faith amidst all kinds of alternative possibilities. So I teach regularly a class for all first-year students on our campus called an Introduction to Worldviews. What we do is to survey many isms, various philosophies and some religions, and we try to understand those various worldviews for what they offer to folks. And there are literally millions, sometimes billions of people around the world who pursue a way of life that we talk about in the class. But we also want to try to show how and why and where our Christian perspective and Christian way of life is genuinely better. But is it? The piece that you just saw is a clip from a new project that we started about 3 years ago called Room for Doubt, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. Doubt is a perplexing issue, and many of you probably have some questions, if not doubts. Now, fortunately, at 10:45, I see the program has a panel discussion with other people in here, and you're supposed to be able to answer or ask whatever you want, and they're supposed to have all the answers. So I see my assigned responsibility to raise big questions for you to give to them, and then see how they squirm at the good questions that you raise. Anyway, I'm so grateful that you have taken a part of your weekend to be here on campus. I trust and pray that God's Spirit will bless you from being here, that God's Spirit will be speaking to you and through you as a result of your being here. Some of you are in that stage. Many of you just, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I headed? How do I want God to use me? Those of you who are at the present time really plugged in to the will of God in your life. And I hope that this weekend will be a great opportunity for you to allow God to speak to you and through you. And hopefully, perhaps, Lincoln Christian University will play a part in your future life. I hope that that's the case. You should, if you haven't gotten a couple of handouts, if you came in a little bit late, I have 2 handouts on the table in the back. One of them is a sign-up sheet that I'll talk about a little bit later, and the other is an outline for the session this morning and some fill-in-the-blanks. So if you did not pick up a pencil or have something to write with, I've got some pencils in the back, so feel free to get up and get some writing instrument, because you don't want to go home with blanks left on your sheet, do you? Like, what was supposed to go in that blank? So I'll try to fill in the blanks for you as we go. Here's the first thing that I'd like for us to think about. I'd like for you to just reflect on yourself and your own faith. Now, I'm not presuming that every one of you is a Christian. Some of you may be on campus today and you're just here out of curiosity. Somebody invited you. Maybe you're not plugged into this Christianity stuff, but you're curious. If so, that's great. We're glad to have you here. Some of you have been around this Christian faith business for a long time, some fairly new to it. But what I'd like for you to do is take your hand out and circle the number that best represents the strength of your faith as you see it right now. Now, 10 would be like, oh, I can't believe anymore. Like, I believe so strongly. Now, 6 or 7 would be like, my faith is fairly strong, but, not real strong. 1 would be something like, what's God? Or who's Jesus? Or I have no belief whatsoever. So commit yourself, circle a number. If you want to, cover up. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you may go get a pencil. Can she go get a pencil? Let's give her permission. Yes, I thank you for initiating that action so that you can participate wholly. All right, now just a couple of, just a few seconds on this. Where do you put yourself in terms of the strength of your faith right now? In general. I'm not going to ask for you to express it to everybody else. You can keep it private if you want. Just cover it up. Now, one of the things that I want to do in our breakout this morning is to talk about some warning signs. Now, you guys have your own set of warning signs in your culture because just looking around, most of you are younger than I am. Would we agree on that? Which means I was younger, but a long time ago. And I had my own warning signs. I remember a TV show that used to irritate me to death. It was called Lost in Space. And it was about this family that accidentally got on some space mission, and they ended up going into space, and they were lost in space, and they had this robot. You can see, this robot right there. And the kid, they had a teenage boy named Will, and the family name was Robinson. And every episode, this robot thing, whose arms, went like that. You remember? You actually saw this? Oh, your dad told you about it. Okay, it's like ancient legend, I guess, something like that. So and every time it would say this several times during the episode: "Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!" Now, just so you'll know I'm not making all that up, this is more the way it actually sounded.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
And you knew almost within minutes of the time that the warning came from this little robot, he would do some stupid thing. He never would take the warning. Let me mention a couple of other possible warnings for us. This is in 1 Corinthians 10. Now, for those of you who circled a fairly high number on your sheet, and I hope you were able to do that. I hope you were able to say, hey, my faith is really strong, and I think it's like 7 or 8, 9. Now, if you think you're 10, then this passage speaks especially to you. Because Paul says to us, if you think you are standing firm, watch out. Because you can fall. Here's another warning passage in 1 Peter chapter 5. The imagery is pretty powerful. It introduces us to our adversary, Satan. And it describes him as though he is a lion roaming around seeking whom he might devour. Oh, that's a real pretty picture, isn't it? You like to get up on a Saturday morning thinking about that? There is some spiritual force out there who is actually prowling around, in a sense, looking for somebody that he might devour. That's a pretty significant warning, isn't it? Here's another warning. It's in Ephesians chapter 6. This warning comes again from the Apostle Paul, who says that we should put on a full armor that we might be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. And what that is suggesting to me, I think it's fairly obvious, is that Satan has a variety of strategies that are designed to assault your faith. Eventually to demolish it, to eliminate it, but initially at least to try to weaken it. How many of you have ever heard of C.S. Lewis? You know, the Narnia tale dude, and there have been movies released about him. In 1942, C.S. Lewis published a book called The Screwtape Letters. How many of you have ever heard of the Screwtape Letters? Okay, about 4 of you, a half of whom are over 30, I think. Which is fine, but I would recommend to you that you can find this, online. In fact, there are movie versions that you can watch online about this. But basically, it is about a senior demon named Screwtape who has a nephew who's kind of an apprentice demon. Like he's learning how to, be demony, I guess is how you would say it. And so what the Screwtape Letters is a set of letters that Wormwood writes to his nephew, giving him instructions for how he can assure the damnation of a guy referred to as the patient. So if we think about all this lion praying around, stuff like that, by the way, that's not praying this way, but praying like, we think about the devil as a lion praying around for whom he might devour. These are the strategies. One of the things I want us to think about this morning is, what are some of those strategies that we may be facing in our lone life because of the activity of spiritual forces that are not in our best good? A part of what all of us, I think, deal with, and I'll be honest with you, quite candid about it, I've got doubts at times about Christian faith. I mean, does it shock you that a Christian university professor who teaches Christian apologetics about defending Christian faith, sometimes in a day, the thought crosses my mind, what if it's just all made up? What if God doesn't actually exist? What if Jesus is, in fact, just a legend? What if the Bible is just a whole bunch of myth that doesn't have any real connection with history? Now, fortunately, I'm able to say, I think that we have some very strong responses to give to those tough questions, but we got doubts. And here's part of the point. Doubt can be a very positive thing for you. It can be, here's where you can fill in one of your blanks. Doubt can be a very good thing. So if you have, at any time, maybe you haven't faced it yet very much. Maybe you don't have that many doubts consciously, but I guarantee you that at various points, doubts will come your way, and they're going to become more significant and severe as time goes on. But doubt can, in fact, I am so grateful that the disciples of Jesus were all doubters. Now, you've heard about Thomas, right? I mean, he's called Doubting Thomas. How would you like for somebody to remember you 2,000 years in the future as the doubter? Not a real positive characteristic, is it? But Thomas was not the only doubter. Every single one of Jesus' closest followers doubted him. But I'm grateful for that because they were not gullible. They were not ready just to believe whatever. They were all skeptical, but they were given adequate answers for their doubts and their questions. And because of that, their faith actually became stronger. Now, on the other hand, doubt can be a very dangerous thing, depending upon how we allow it to fester. In fact, Some have suggested, and I'll have a quotation on the screen here in a minute to that effect, and I totally agree with it, that the most dangerous kind of doubt is unexpressed doubt. What that means is it's a doubt that you've got about some aspect of your faith, and you just keep it to yourself. You don't talk to anybody about it. You just hold it inside. Maybe you do your own, little searches online to figure out how to think through something. But you keep it to yourself. In fact, David Kinnaman, in a book called You Lost Me, talking about how many young people who are in a Christian heritage or a Christian family, Christian church, how many young people actually wander away and many leave their faith, and unexpressed doubt that's never been shared and answered, is what's the most dangerous kind of thing. So Kinnaman puts it this way, simply, I believe that unexpressed doubt is one of the most powerful destroyers of faith. So one thing I want to encourage you today, not just this weekend, like, share all your doubts, today and then forget about it. What I'm talking about is probably more relevant to you after you get back home. And as you go through the rest of the school year and next school year. How many of you are, any of you graduating this school year? Okay, so we have some. Or it might be for wherever you end up next year. That's where it's going to be most relevant for you. Now, one thing that I would like then to emphasize is this whole idea of doubt can be a doorway that will either lead to deeper belief or to greater disbelief. So the graphic that I have on screen right now is intended to communicate a couple of points to you. Number one, doubt is fine. Doubt is good. If you doubt and share your doubts and questions, it can actually strengthen your faith. So you can walk through the doorway of doubt and you can find a deeper faith. And that's what God intends. Or you can walk through the doorway of doubt, and depending on how you respond to it, it can lead to a destruction of your faith. Here's another main point. It's not really good news. I hate to share it with you. This is Saturday morning. We're supposed to eat donuts, and stuff like that, and have fun. And I only slightly apologize because I have, some warnings to bring to you that might wake you up a little bit, but that's what Peter said that we looked at a while ago. You'd better be alert. You'd better be sober. And that doesn't mean just, you haven't been or whatever. It means your mind is clear. You're thinking about things clearly, about things of God clearly. Well, here's the warning. Your faith can falter and even fail. Even those of you who say put 7 or higher when you circled it. Now we're going to look at a few statistics here. These don't apply to you directly, but they're relevant to you. They come from places like the Barna Research Institute, the Pew Research Council. I've got those in a footnote on your outline front page. But this is talking about people who are young people like you with a Christian background, and I assume, that's probably where you are. And when addressing this question about whether they have significantly doubted their faith, almost 40% of them said they significantly have doubted their faith. In fact, when asked about their faith relative to their parents' faith, 32% of them said at one point they felt like rejecting their parents' faith totally. And when asked this question, how comfortable do you feel like you can be to raise your tough questions and even express your doubts in the confines of your church? Now, would you have a guess on what the number might be on this one? Let's see what God says revealed to us. Still more than a third. Now, another major point here of relevance that this kind of leads to is the question for young people like you who have a Christian background, how many of them, percent-wise, actually wander away from their involvement in church life after high school and into their 20s? Have you heard any of these numbers before? Pretty disturbing. Here's one of the lowest numbers that I have been able to uncover. Right at 6 out of 10 young people with a Christian background end up wandering away from their church involvement. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't believe in God any longer, period, per se. They may still have some faith of some sort, but they're not plugged in any longer. And a number of them do, in fact, leave their faith. They become prodigals in a kind of biblical sense. They just wander away from it. Now, that 59% is the lowest. I've actually seen a number, I don't even publicize it because it seems so high, but I've seen a number of 88%, the results of a study done by the Southern Baptist Convention several years ago on the number of their young people who end up wandering away from their church involvement, many wandering away from faith during their college years. The point is this: how many of these young people, when they were in high school, like you are, thought that they would walk away from church and their faith? How many of you think that they thought they would do that? Now, I don't know that we have any direct way to analyze that or to expose that, but my guess is this. My guess is that not very many of them, at the time they were involved in church life, when they were in high school, not many of them said, you know what, when I'm 22, I'm going to walk away from all this. Now, that means one very practical thing for you. Just because you think, probably now today, that you will not walk away doesn't mean that you won't. And in fact, if you fit with the general statistics here, a number of you will in fact do that. Now, I happen to attend a church that runs, 800 or 900 on a Sunday morning. It's been a big church for a long time, Lincoln Christian Church here in town, and we've had a great youth program for years and years. I had 3 kids, all now grown and married, but all of them went through that youth program, and they did all kinds of wonderful things. They went to events like this. They went on short-term mission trips. They went to CIY events, Christ in Youth events. And yet I remember, as I reflect on it, how many of their friends who were plugged into church life are now nowhere to be seen with regard to their faith. So the warning is a significant warning. So what are the kinds of things that you should watch for? What we're going to do is to look at some things to watch for and either introduce you to some people to watch for. Here are some of the schemes, it seems to me, things that you're going to watch. By the way, these will introduce some questions that you could ask the panel, at 10:45. Say, here, I got a good question for you. So just knock them dead, will you? Just don't tell them I put you up to it. Okay, so you're committed to giving them some really tough questions. Here's some things to watch for. Some schemes. One thing is watch for your moral life. Because one of the things that Satan can do by way of a scheme is to get you involved in making a decision or a set of decisions that will have a direct effect on your moral condition. And that itself can have a major effect upon how you look at your faith in general. Here's another kind of a doubt that you need to watch for: self-doubt. We're just different people, aren't we? I mean, you know that. We have different personalities. Some of us are a little more emotional oriented than others. Some of us are very, intellectual. And that affects everything about us. Some of us just don't feel confident about much of anything. Like when I was a kid, I had a younger brother. He was like 2.5 years younger than I was. And every once in a while, I'd have to go out and sell things, in the neighborhood to get money and stuff like that. I always took my brother George along because I hated to go up to the door and actually knock. That just wasn't me. It's me. I'm not confident enough to do that. But my brother, let me give you an idea of him. He was selling kisses to girls when he was like 5. He wasn't bashful about much of anything. We'd walk down the sidewalk, and there'd be the door, and I'd go, okay, George, there it is. He's 2.5 years younger, and he'd whack on the door, and if I didn't answer, he'd go around the back. It's no wonder why he had turned out being a salesperson, most of his life. But that wasn't me. I at that time, in that way, I didn't have that kind of self-confidence. And sometimes that can have an effect upon your faith and how you view yourself. Am I good enough? Do I have any abilities that could even be used by God in any way, shape, or form? And some of you have that kind of self-doubt. You wonder whether you have anything to offer. There's also a spiritual doubt. It may be partly the consequence of your moral matters. You wonder whether you're really saved by God. You wonder about that relationship. There's another kind of doubt. Some of you will be approached with a variety of intellectual doubts. Now, I don't have a place on your handout to mark a circle, but you might ask yourself this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you put yourself in terms of like emotion at one end as opposed to intellect at the other? Well, some of you are going to put yourself down at the emotion end. Somebody will put yourself on the end. And many high school youth don't see themselves as greatly intellectual. So for you, it might appear to be an irrelevant question right now. But here's where the warning comes in. You and your faith will be assaulted on a variety of intellectual considerations. Let me give you an idea of what some of those are. Here's a major study by at the time he published the book, he was a sociologist at Notre Dame. Christian Smith, in this book called Soul Searching, he asked young people why they wandered away from their Christian faith, and the most common answer he got is that it was intellectual reason why they wandered away. It was an open-ended question. It wasn't multiple choice. So he just said, why did you wander away? And the most common answer that he got in an open-ended question, 32% of them said, the reason was things just don't make sense anymore. They said things like that. Some stuff is too far-fetched for me to believe. I think scientifically there is no real proof. There are too many questions that don't have answers. Now, for you right now, let's just, be honest. This might not be a big issue with you right now. But what I'm suggesting to you is that as you go through your faith life, especially when you get out of high school, although during as well, you will be challenged more and more on those more intellectual kinds of questions. The very existence of God will be called into question. The very historicity of Jesus and who he was and is will be called into question. The reliability and the historicity of the Bible will be called into question. Now, I have 3 graduate degrees, all of them in the area of philosophy, but I did my PhD at the University of Illinois in Champaign. And when I went there, I worked as a graduate assistant with one of the professors who had taught there so long that the world religions class I was helping him in the first semester had about 400 or 500 students in it. And he had been teaching so long that he had grandchildren of students whom he'd had years and years before. Harry Tebow was his name, and Harry would love to come in the first day of class, and he'd have a Bible and a Quran and some other things, and he'd come in. He was a show person, you know, big stage, hundreds of students. He taught that class every semester for that many years, and he'd end up throwing the Bible around, even throwing the Quran around. That was before, you know, it might be a little more dangerous to do that these days. And he'd have a few choice curse words to say. He'd actually have a couple of hand gestures that he would make to God. And it was one of his agenda items. He was going to challenge the faith of anybody who believed anything. Now, fortunately, it's not all that way at the university. I mean, I've had some very notable examples of that, but fortunately, there are pockets of believers there, strong believers, and there are strong campus ministries on those campuses. I've been a board member at the University of Illinois campus ministry now for about 20 years. I know that good things happen on a university campus by way of Christians, but there are some who are out to challenge your faith. They're going to try to contend that somehow science condemns your faith to falsity. Creation, evolution, the origin of life. This is what you're going to hear. These are things that you're going to need to watch for. Now, what I'm getting at is that there are some really good responses that Christians have to all this. Now, I don't have a lot of time in the session this morning to go into that, but that's why you can ask all those questions to this panel that's going to come in, right? Yes, you're committed to that. I can see it in your face. Here's some things to watch for. It's volitional doubt. This is probably the most serious form of a doubt. Because now, if you ever get to this point, what you're saying is, I don't want to believe. I don't want to follow a Christian way of life. Now, sometimes that can happen early on. That can be one of the first steps. And then people commit themselves to a way of life. They want to live a certain kind of life, and then they go back intellectually and they try to explain why they don't believe in God any longer. So it differs among people. Sometimes they begin with intellectual questions and intellectual doubts, and they may go unanswered, and then they decide, well, I'm not going to follow God anymore. That's a bunch of bunk. You see how the way of life follows their intellectual consideration. But sometimes it's the opposite. In fact, I think most often it's the opposite. People want to live a certain way of life, and then they go back and they try to explain and rationalize to themselves why they don't want to live a moral life any longer, because this God stuff isn't all it's cracked up to be. Well, those are some of the doubts. But who are some of the people and the influences that you need to watch for? Now, the initial and easiest response to that is that it's the people who are most visible and the easiest to access and the most interesting, I guess you'd say. And one of those, if you do much thinking about this area, one of them is going to be this guy. I would say that Richard Dawkins is probably the most well-known atheistic evolutionary biologist in the world today. He has written an awful lot of very high-level scientific stuff, but he's also written a lot more popularly. And one of his famous books was a big, big seller and still is. It's called The God Delusion. Here's one thing that Richard Dawkins says, just to give you an idea of how he speaks. When one person suffers from a delusion, it is called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it's called religion. So if Richard Dawkins were to come through that door right now and come up here to the front, he would probably point his finger at you and say something like this: you are idiots. You are fools. You are so gullible to accept this God junk because God is a delusion. Now, some of that influence is going to come through to you through other people, not necessarily directly from Richard Dawkins. Here's another person. Just give an idea of the book title, God is Not Great. The subtitle is How Religion Poisons Everything. This is by Christopher Hitchens. That's a part of the influence. Here's somebody else. I don't know if you ever see this kind of stuff, but at Christmas time and at Easter, there are all kinds of these specials about religion and Christianity and Jesus. It's Christmas. You might as well talk about Jesus a little bit. Even National Geographic or History Channel or CNN or Fox News sometimes will carry these special episodes, these special events, talking about Easter events. One of the guys who appears very frequently on those documentaries is a professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina named Bart Ehrman. Notice the title of his book, one of many that has the same theme, How Jesus Became God. The exaltation of a Jewish preacher from Galilee. See, Jesus was not God. His followers made him into God. He's professor of religious studies. But you know what? He doesn't really believe anything about God anymore. Now, perhaps ironically, he was actually converted to Christianity when he was a teenager. He became very involved. He was involved in street evangelism. He'd go around and talk to people about Jesus. He actually went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago for his undergraduate school. And then later, when he went off elsewhere to school, he essentially lost all Christian faith and all faith in God. Here's another one of his books. It's called Forged. Writing in the name of God, why the Bible's authors are not who we think they are. So you can't trust the Bible. Because the Bible tells us about Jesus, so you can't trust anything about Jesus. And Jesus somehow gives us evidence of God, but you can't trust Jesus or the Bible, so you really can't have any real evidence about God. Wow. And this is going to be a part of what you're going to face in various ways. Even though you're not familiar perhaps with the names of these people, there are others that are mirroring or mimicking their ideas. Here's Lawrence Krauss. He's a very famous atheist who's also a physicist. And he's gone on a tour with Richard Dawkins, a tour called The Unbelievers. Here's the way he put it at one point. He said, change is always one generation away. So if we can plant the seeds of doubt in our children, religion will go away in a generation. Now what I see him saying there is this, applying it to you. His scheme is to raise doubt in your mind. But the kind of doubt that becomes dangerous doubt, the kind of doubt that is not given a Christian response, it's the kind of a doubt that ends up devastating your faith. That's what his scheme is. And we need to watch for it. But you know what? Probably the most different thing in our culture today is the fact that, see what I'm using here? I'm using a fancy little piece of software that tells me not only what slide is up, it also tells me what slide's coming next. So that's pretty amazing, right? And as you know, I could just hop online and I could find whatever I want almost like that. I just do a search. Aren't you amazed that whenever you do a search term, it brings it up and it actually tells you how long it took? Like you got 3,432,625,437 hits in 0.0000001 seconds. And I am... Now, when I was a kid, which was literally another century, but don't take that too far, please. I didn't have any of that. I mean, if I had questions, I had to go to somebody to talk to them about it. If I had doubts about something, I had to go someplace, or I had to go to an actual library with like real books. Like, look at this. I commend you. Is this yours? You didn't steal it. Okay, so I'm commending you. I had back fusion surgery this summer. I'd have to have surgery again if I carried this thing around all the time. But I commend you for doing that. I've got about 30 some versions of the Bible on my phone, including Greek and Hebrew and all other kinds of associated study tools. And you have access to this powerful tool as well, which means that when you start having some questions about God and Jesus and the Bible and science and your faith, the easiest thing to do is just say, "Hey Siri, does God really exist?" Now, I didn't actually do that, but because it might pop me out of my slides and not get back in. But it's so easy to do that. Now, one reason why this is important is because of a study that I'm referring to here by Larry Taunton. And he talked to a lot of people who were Christian kids like you who wandered away from their faith, actually who abandoned their faith, and he wanted to know why. And here's what he says in a kind of summary statement. He says, when our participants, were asked to cite key influences in their conversion to atheism, hey, why did you become an atheist? Thinking about people and books and seminars, we expected to hear frequent references to the names of the new atheists. Well, the new atheists are people like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Harris, or Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, some of the same people that I've already talked to you about. But here's what he said. We didn't hear that. Not one time. Nobody mentioned the name of Richard Dawkins or Christopher Harris, Hitchens. What did they say? Instead, we heard vague references to videos that they had watched on YouTube. So here's the paradox. You've got instant access to incredible information. You also have instant access to some terrible information quickly. And the tendency, when you have doubts and questions in your faith, the tendency psychologically will be not to share it with somebody live, but first to go online and start typing in or speaking in some question. And you will tend to gravitate toward people who look at things the way you are. That's the danger. I think that's one of Satan's most effective strategies or schemes. You have questions, but instead of expressing your questions and even doubts to people who care about you and who can provide some good response, you go and find people who are thinking like you, who end up pulling you further and further away from the stability of your Christian faith. Okay, so where to turn for help? This is the good news part of it. I want to say there are some places where you can go to find very good answers to the questions that will undoubtedly come before you in coming months and years. So where can you go? Well, I've got a set of P words. If you want to take notes on this, that's fine. And the session, by the way, will be available later on video, and I'll make the slides available for you if you're interested in that. The website that I have listed on your handout to Worldview Eyes, it's called worldvieweyes.org. That's another grant program that I've been involved in directing for over 15 years, and most all of the materials and presentations that I do, I make available on that website. So if you're interested in following up on this session or with other sessions that I've done on other kinds of topics, just go to worldvieweyes.org, and there's a link on that home page taking you to a list of presentations that I've done. So I'll make this material available there on Worldview Eyes. That's one kind of a source that you can use. But let me get back to these P words. I'm kind of into, you know what alliteration means? Alliteration. Like whenever, alliteration. That's like 5 cylinders. Syllables. Okay, I really knew the difference, but just toying with you here. It's one of those big words, and it just means, that I'm kind of into, coming up with sets of terms and whatever, where you're using the same sound sometimes, or the same sound at the ending of the word. I just tend to be into P words for some reason. And let me explain some of the reason why. Number one, my last name is Knopp, with 2 P's. So maybe it's a subliminal, unconscious thing. I'm into P's because my last name, even though it's short, has 2 P's in it. And then, perhaps more importantly, I'm a grandfather. I have 7 grandkids, ranging from about 2, the most darling little girl you could ever lay your eyes on, up to a 17-year-old grandson. Now, about 15 years ago, when my oldest grandson was very young and he couldn't speak very much, they were trying to tell him how they were supposed to call, refer to me and to my wife, whose name is Paula. And we kind of decided, well, she wants to be referred to as Mimi, like spelled M-I-M-I, Mimi. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And little kids, they could learn that fairly easily. Mimi, kind of like mama. So what we decided to do for me is that we're going to have them call me Grampy. If you spell it out like G-R-A-M-P-Y. Grampy. The problem is you can't get little kids to say 2-syllable words. So they're going to truncate it or shorten it. And guess what they shortened it to? P. To this day, all of my grandchildren and even my sons-in-law refer to me as P. So if one were to come in, right now, here I'm a university professor, right? I'm standing up and doing this presentation. I'd probably have a grandchild come in right now and say, "Hi, P." I remember when they were coming to our house one time, one of my daughters and husband and their kids, the kids were saying where they wanted to go, and they were shortening everything, and they put it this way. They said, "We want to go see Mimi P." They leave out the conjunction. They just left out the and. So I'm into P words. That was a long introduction to why I do that. Here's one, Christian prayer. Whenever you've got questions and even doubts about your faith in some aspect, I challenge you to be fervent in asking God for guidance. Seek, and you will find, Jesus said. And I don't want to undermine or to devalue the importance of a strong relationship where you're speaking with God and just sharing with Him. If you read the book of Job, if you haven't, I encourage you to do that. You know what? Job was angry with God. Job was expressing his outburst at God. He lost his wife, he lost his kids, he lost his living. And then there's this good God up there that somehow cares for him. You got to be kidding me. See, it teaches us, even from the pages of Scripture, that it's okay to express our outrage sometimes, even at God. Christian prayer. He was still praying. Here's another one. Don't leave it as unexpressed doubt. Talk to Christian peers. And by that I mean people whom you have reason to believe will help your faith, not hinder your faith. And that might mean opening up some communication with a set of friends or with somebody that you don't know that well right now. Who is that you could turn to? Or for some of you, I challenge you to be that person whose faith is so strong, the person who is so encouraging that others who have questions and doubts about their faith, they will come to you and say, can you help me with this? Here's a third P. I call it Christian parents, but I don't just mean biological parents. One of the important results of the studies that I've seen that makes a big difference in terms of whether a Christian high schooler will remain committed to Christ and the church after high school graduation. One of the most important factors is whether you have a relationship with somebody who is older than you, like parent age. Now, some of you are blessed enough that you've got a Christian mom or dad who is understanding and who would be more than thrilled to help your faith and help you work through some issues. But some of you don't. That's just a fact of life. Some of you don't have a Christian mom or Christian dad. And you've had a different kind of an upbringing. But you do have Christian parents that are available. It might be a church leader. It might be a youth sponsor. It might be your youth pastor or somebody in whom you can confide and share openly your questions and even your doubts so that they won't be intimidating to you and make you feel like you are a second-class citizen. Remember, it was 36% of Christian young people say they don't feel that they can ask their most pressing question in church. Here's another P word. I just label it as Christian publications. And here, I just want you to know that there are a lot of very good Christian-oriented websites and articles and videos that you can access. And here's where I would recommend to you that you especially check out this other website that I have listed on your outline today called Room for Doubt. That's kind of a strange name in some ways, because one of the purposes of that program called Room for Doubt is to strengthen Christian faith and to represent the truth claims of the Christian faith effectively. Why are you emphasizing doubt? It's because doubt is okay. Doubt in itself is neutral. It's a doorway. And you can go through that doorway of doubt and it will actually deepen your faith. Or you can go through that doorway of doubt to the point where it defeats your faith. It depends on what you do with it. So one of the things that this Room for Doubt program is trying to do is to communicate a different environment, a different atmosphere within churches and youth groups to say, hey, it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to have tough doubts, but that is a good resource. In fact, when you have an opportunity to go to roomfordoubt.com, one of the things that you'll see is that we have a spot there where you can ask questions. Or if you have friends of yours who have questions about the Christian faith, they can go on and they can type in their question. Here's my question. And then we will respond to those questions. We have answers to those questions posted both in written form and as well as in video form as well. So those are the kinds of things. There's also a resource list available on Room for Doubt. So for you youth leaders, I've got few in this session now. For you who are youth sponsors or youth leaders, there are some good resources for you, and a number of websites that are listed for you high school guys and gals to find some dependable places where you can get some help or where you can direct some of your friends who have those same kind of questions. So this is the website, roomfordoubt.com. It shows a part of the shot from the opening page. The program is designed to provide an environment where we want to encourage your questions. We want to address whatever doubts that you might have. And eventually, we want to strengthen your faith. So I strongly urge you to check out Room for Doubt, as well as that other website that I mentioned to you, worldviewwise.org. And then I want to mention Christian professors. Now, there are a lot of other people that are not necessarily professors. They might be a pastor at your, that's pastor, that's another P, isn't it? Or preacher, that's another P. Wow, they're all over the place. But I want to emphasize Christian professors. Now, it might be, I hope it will be for some of you, if not many, if not all of you, that a part of your future might involve Lincoln Christian University. I hope that God's Spirit actually will be speaking and working with you not only while you're here, but when you go back home. What am I going to do with my life? How can I be used? Maybe LCU is a place I need seriously to consider. But here's the point. Even if you don't end up coming to Lincoln as a college student or a graduate student later on, you can still use many of the resources that are available on this campus, including professors. So I have my email address listed on the handout. I also have at the back, if you haven't picked it up yet, there's a sign-up sheet here. And if you want to have some periodic encouragement, it might be a text that comes to you, it might be email or an announcement about something new online that you can access. If you're willing to leave us your contact information, then periodically we'll just send you some help. And then I also want to say to you, feel free to contact me or other Christian professors here at Lincoln, and we'll do anything that we can to help your faith, even if you don't end up coming here. Now, we hope you do, but even if you don't, we want you to know that we are here as a caring resource for you, and I've given you a strategy for staying in touch with us.